Brothers and sisters, I know I said that I already made a video, the last video on suffering, but we just tease out a few more things and then we could move on. But it's so central to us, and this mystery is really important for us to find our path towards heaven. And so in the last video, I ended by listing a whole bunch of kind of moral issues, the hot topic issues that often the church is bashed for, or, you know, the media drags us over the coals over, you know, is it our stance on sexuality and the defense of marriage of a man and a woman, and the idea of the sexual intimacy being view of that. But there are also issues about euthanasia and a whole bunch of other ethical issues that touch on, like in vitro fertilization, that the church is against. It also touches on questions of social justice as well. It's not just about sexual issues, but about the whole question of social justice as well, about the radical vision of the church towards one's goods and properties, that one is, after one has satisfied one's needs and for their family and their duties, that they have a duty out of love to share from their excess and their abundance with those in need. And this is often a message too that we can forget, and that involves suffering, you know, the suffering of detachment, of letting go. You know, in my own journey is the whole value of celibacy. This is not something imposed on me. I willfully desired it and chose it. And is it a suffering? Well, yes, at first it's this renunciation of the good of marriage and the beauty of a family. But it's also on this point that in my own life, I'm so deeply convinced and convicted, is because, yes, seemingly to do something difficult, but it's met by grace. God doesn't ask us to do things that he's not going to give his grace for. And so God is not a stingy God trying to crush our dreams and crush our desires and suppress us. And no, the opposite. He wants to fulfill the deepest longing of our hearts. But the problem is, we think we know how to fulfill those deep longings, or we think we know what our truest desires are, but no, God knows, and God created us, and if we follow the way of the gospel, the paradox is, it looks like it's going to be very difficult, and it is, or it looks like it can't possibly end or cannot possibly lead me to peace and joy, but it does. And so even on the value of celibacy, I'm a great defender of it, because it's such a beautiful gift to be able, in our deepest hearts as religious and as priests, to want to give that whole of our life and order it towards God. And in fact, what I experience is a greater freedom to love more people, because when you're married, such a beautiful gift. You're giving yourself for your wife, or your wife for the husband, and therefore in view of your children. It's an exclusive love in that sense. You're focusing, or you should be focusing, your duties are there. And of course, none of us have it all perfect. But in celibacy, we imitate Christ in his, that to free. So Christ went from village to village, that he was able to enter so many more people's lives, bringing the love of the Father, because he was free from an exclusive love of marriage and all the rights and duties that would bring. And so, does that involve a suffering? Yes, but for me, in my experience, the joy and the intimacy that celibacy brings with God, and the ability to have the most times of solitude and time of prayer with him, it outstrips, for me, any other desire for marriage. But that's my vocation, and the suffering that is involved in it over the years has led me to life and more life. And so it looked like a difficult thing, but maybe sometimes God is calling other people in society to maybe towards the single life, and they think it might be the end of the world, but it's not. And there's so many ways of fulfilling ourselves. So on this whole question of suffering, the devil does not want us to hear the message that the gospel is life-giving, that the demands of the gospel, the high morality of the church, which is a morality that is supposed to lead us to flourish, not to squash us. The problem is people approach morality without intimacy, without relationship with God, and that is when it suppresses us, absolutely. But when the morality is in view of a greater end, not just an obligation, but in view of uniting us to Jesus, then the intimacy produced from that sacrificial love of giving down your life for God, suffering for God in that sense, suffering these difficult things for God, then we get an intimacy with Christ that is unparalleled. As my late grandmother Marina said to me just a few months before she died, I was complaining about a few things, and she said, "You're a priest, you should be happy to suffer for God." And that has always stayed with me. And it's true, there's a joy in suffering for God, because it means that our love for God is more true and it's real, and that gives joy.